Part 2, The Awakening of Memories. Aboard the Eclipse. The hum of the Eclipse's engines filled the air as the ship hurtled through the void of space. Captain Yarrick Voss stood in the dimly lit observation deck, staring out at the stars. Behind him, Lyra sat quietly, her silver hair shimmering under the soft glow of the ship's lights. She had been silent since they left the planet, her luminous eyes fixed on the floor. "How is she?" Yarrick asked as Dr. Elias Trent entered the room. "Physically, she's stable," Trent replied, his voice low. "But there's something unusual about her. Her cells are regenerating at an incredible rate. It's like her body is repairing itself on a molecular level." Yarrick glanced at Lyra, who seemed oblivious to their conversation. "And her memory?" "Fragmented," Trent said. "She remembers her name, but nothing else. It's as if her mind has been locked away, piece by piece." Yarrick crouched in front of Lyra, his voice gentle. "Lyra, do you remember anything about where you came from? Anything at all?" For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, her lips parted, and she whispered, "Etheris." The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Yarrick exchanged a glance with Trent. "Etheris? Is that a place? A person?" Lyra's brow furrowed, and she clutched her head, as if the effort to remember caused her pain. I don't know. It's all blurry." The Krylos threat. The ship's comms crackled to life, and Lieutenant Mira Kell's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Captain, we've got a problem. A Krylos warship just dropped out of hyperspace. They're hailing us." Jarek's jaw tightened. The Krylos were a ruthless alien faction, known for their advanced technology and relentless pursuit of power. If they were here, it could only mean one thing: they were after Lyra. "On my way," Yarrick said, standing. He turned to Trent. "Stay with her. Keep her safe." As Yarrick strode onto the bridge, the view screen lit up with the image of a Krylos commander. His face was angular, his skin a deep shade of blue, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "Human vessel," the Krylos commander said, his voice cold and mechanical. "You have something that belongs to us. Surrender the girl, and we will allow you to leave unharmed." Yarrick crossed his arms, his expression steely. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is Terran space. You have no jurisdiction here." The Krylos commander's lips curled into a sneer. "Do not test us, human. The girl is ours. She carries knowledge that belongs to the Krylos. Hand her over, or we will take her by force." The transmission ended abruptly, and the bridge fell silent. Mira turned to Yarrick, her face pale. "Captain, their ship is twice our size. We can't outrun them, and we sure as hell can't outgun them." Jarek's mind raced. He couldn't hand Lyra over, not after what he'd seen in her eyes. There was something about her, something important. But how could they escape the Krylos? Lyra's awakening. Back in the medbay, Lyra's eyes suddenly widened. She stood, her movements fluid and graceful, as if she were being guided by an unseen force. "Lyra?" Trent asked, his voice tinged with concern. "What's wrong?" "They're coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can feel them." Before Trent could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing him off balance. The lights flickered, and the sound of alarms filled the air. "Captain." Myra's voice came through the comms. "They're firing on us." Jarek's voice was calm but urgent. "Evasive maneuvers, now. Trent, get Lyra to the escape pods." But Lyra was already moving. She stepped into the corridor, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The ship shook again, and the sound of metal groaning under stress echoed through the halls. "Lyra, wait." Trent called, but she didn't stop. She moved with purpose, as if she knew exactly where she was going. The power within. Yarrick met her in the corridor, his expression a mix of frustration and concern. Lyra, what are you doing? We need to get you to safety. She turned to him, her eyes blazing. I can stop them. Before Yarrick could respond, the ship lurched again, and the sound of tearing metal filled the air. The Krylos had breached the hull. Lyra closed her eyes, and the air around her seemed to shimmer. A low hum filled the corridor, growing louder and more intense. Yarrick felt a strange energy in the air, like static electricity, and his hair stood on end. What's happening? Myra's voice came through the comms, panicked. Captain, the Krylos ship, it's powering down. Yarrick stared at Lyra, his heart pounding. Her body was glowing now, the scars on her skin lighting up like constellations. She raised her hands, and the hum reached a crescendo. Outside the ship, the Krylos warship's lights flickered and died. Its engines sputtered, and it drifted lifelessly in the void. A new threat. The bridge fell silent as the crew stared at the viewscreen, stunned. What just happened? Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yarrick didn't have an answer. He turned to Lyra, who had collapsed to her knees, her glow fading. He knelt beside her, his voice soft. Lyra, are you okay? She looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what I did. I felt it. The power. It's inside me. Yarrick helped her to her feet, his mind racing. Whatever Lyra was, she was more than just a lost girl. She was a weapon, a key to something far greater than any of them could imagine. But as he looked at her, he saw not a weapon, but a person, a scared, broken person who needed help. We'll figure this out, he said, his voice firm. Together. The road to Etheris. As the Eclipse moved away from the disabled Krylos ship, Lyra's memories began to resurface. She sat in the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the stars. Etheris, she said softly. It's a place. A city. My home. Yarrick sat beside her, his voice gentle. What do you remember about it? It was beautiful, she whispered, her voice filled with longing. But something happened. Something terrible. The Krylos, they came. They destroyed everything. Yarrick's jaw tightened. We'll find Etheris. We'll uncover the truth. And we'll make sure the Krylos pay for what they've done. Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Yarrick. For believing in me. As the ship continued its journey, Yarrick couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. Lyra's awakening was just the beginning. And the Krylos were only the first of many threats they would face. Part 4, The Lost City of Etheris. The Path to Etheris. The Eclipse drifted through a remote sector of space, its engines humming softly as the crew prepared for the next phase of their journey. Lyra stood at the helm of the ship, her eyes closed as she focused on the faint whispers of memory guiding her. The coordinates she had provided led them to a seemingly empty region of space, but Yarrick trusted her instincts. Are you sure this is the right place? Mira asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. There's nothing here but empty space. Lyra opened her eyes, her luminous gaze fixed on the view screen. Etheris is hidden. It's protected by a cloaking field, one that only responds to me. Yarrick stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. How do we get through? Lyra hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. I need to connect with it. But it's dangerous. The last time I tried, I lost control. Yarrick placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll do it together. You're not alone anymore. The cloaking field. Lyra took a deep breath and closed her eyes once more. The hum of energy filled the air, growing louder as she reached out with her mind. The crew watched in awe as the space before them began to shimmer, like a mirage in the desert. Suddenly, the cloaking field parted, revealing a massive structure hidden within. It was a city, ancient and majestic, its towering spires glowing with an ethereal light. Etheris. Incredible, Dr. Trent whispered, his voice filled with wonder. It's like nothing I've ever seen. The Eclipse approached the city cautiously, its sensors scanning for any signs of life. But the city was silent, its streets empty and its buildings untouched by time. The heart of Etheris. As the ship landed on a sprawling platform, Lyra stepped out, her feet touching the ground of her home for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The air was thick with the scent of ancient stone and faint traces of energy. "This way," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She led the crew through the city's winding streets, her steps guided by an unseen force. The city was a marvel of alien architecture. The buildings were made of a crystalline material that glowed faintly, and the streets were lined with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with energy. But there was an eerie stillness to the place, as if it had been frozen in time. "What happened here?" Yarrick asked, his voice echoing in the silence. Lyra's expression darkened. "The Krylos came. They wanted our technology, our knowledge. But we refused to give it to them. So they destroyed everything." Her voice broke, and Yarrick placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll find the answers you're looking for. I promise." The Chamber of Memories. Lyra led them to a massive structure at the center of the city. Its doors were sealed, but as she approached, they slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the walls were lined with holographic displays, each one flickering with images of Etheris in its prime. "This is the Chamber of Memories," Lyra explained, her voice filled with reverence. "It holds the history of our people." She approached a central console, her hands hovering over its surface. The hum of energy grew louder as the console activated, projecting a holographic image of an ancient alien figure. "Welcome, Lyra," the figure said, its voice warm and familiar. "You have returned." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "Father?" The figure nodded, its expression filled with both pride and sorrow. "I am but a recording, a remnant of what once was. But I am here to guide you." The truth revealed. The hologram began to speak, its voice echoing through the chamber. It told the story of Etheris, a civilization that had thrived for millennia, its people blessed with advanced technology and a deep connection to the energy of the universe. But their greatest achievement was Lyra herself. "You were created to be the bridge between our people and the stars," the hologram explained. "Your power is a gift, one that was meant to protect and preserve. But the Krylos saw you as a weapon, something to be controlled." Lyra's hands clenched into fists. "Why didn't you tell me?" "We wanted to protect you," the hologram replied. "But we failed. The Krylos came, and we were unprepared. We hid you away, hoping that one day you would return and fulfill your destiny." Yarrick stepped forward, his voice firm. "What is her destiny?" The hologram turned to him, its gaze piercing. "To restore Etheris. To protect the knowledge of our people. And to stop the Krylos once and for all." The Krylos arrive. As the hologram faded, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The crew rushed to the chamber's entrance, where they saw a fleet of Krylos ships descending upon the city. "They found us," Mira said, her voice filled with dread. Yarrick turned to Lyra, his expression determined. "We need to activate the city's defenses. Can you do it?" Lyra nodded, her eyes blazing with resolve. "I can. But I'll need your help." The battle for Etheris. The crew split up, each one tasked with activating a different part of the city's defenses. Yarrick stayed with Lyra, guiding her as she connected with the city's central core. The hum of energy grew louder, filling the air with an almost tangible force. The city's spires began to glow brighter, and a shield of energy formed around Etheris, blocking the Krylos' advance. But the Krylos were relentless. Their ships fired upon the shield, their weapons straining against its power. "We can't hold them off forever," Yarrick said, his voice tense. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "We don't have to." She raised her hands, and the energy within her surged. The city's defenses activated, firing beams of light at the Krylos' ships. One by one, the ships were destroyed, their hulls crumbling under the onslaught. A new beginning. As the last Krylos ship fell, the city fell silent once more. Lyra collapsed to her knees, her strength spent. Yarrick caught her, his arms wrapping around her to keep her upright. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. "You saved Etheris." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with exhaustion and hope. "We saved it. Together." As the crew regrouped, Yarrick knew that their journey was far from over. The Krylos would return, and the mystery of Lyra's past was only beginning to unravel. But for now, they had won. And in the heart of Etheris, a new hope was born. Part 1, The Discovery in the Ruins. The Whispering Ruins. The planet was a graveyard of forgotten empires. Jagged spires of black stone pierced the crimson sky, their surfaces etched with symbols that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly glow. Captain Yarrick Voss adjusted the settings on his visor, the HUD flickering as it scanned the ruins. His boots crunched against the brittle ground, the sound echoing in the eerie silence. "Captain, over here." Lieutenant Mira Kell's voice crackled through his comms. Yarrick turned, spotting her crouched near a collapsed archway. Her gloved hand brushed away layers of dust, revealing a faintly glowing emblem. "What is it?" Yarrick asked, joining her. "Not sure," Mira replied, her voice tinged with awe. "But it's active. This place isn't as dead as it looks." Jarek's instincts prickled. The mission was supposed to be simple: survey the planet for any signs of advanced technology. But the ruins felt alive, as if they were watching, waiting. The girl in the shadows. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder. The walls seemed to close in, the symbols glowing brighter with each step. Then, they found her. She was curled up in a corner, her skin pale and shimmering like moonlight. Her hair, a cascade of silver, fell around her shoulders, and her eyes, large and luminous, stared at them with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She was naked, her body marked with faint scars that glowed faintly, matching the symbols on the walls. "What the hell?" Mira whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her sidearm. Yarrick raised a hand, signaling her to stand down. He crouched slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Hey," he said softly, his voice steady. "We're not here to hurt you. Can you understand me?" The girl's lips parted, but no sound came out. She trembled, pulling her knees closer to her chest. "Captain," Dr. Elias Trent's voice came through the comms, "we're picking up strange energy readings from your location. Be careful." "We found someone," Yarrick replied, his eyes never leaving the girl. "She's different." A decision made. The girl didn't resist as Yarrick draped his thermal cloak over her shoulders. Her skin was warm to the touch, and her eyes never left his face, as if searching for something. "We can't just leave her here," Mira said, her voice low. "Agreed," Yarrick said. "But we need to be careful. We don't know what she is or where she came from." As they made their way back to the ship, the girl stumbled, her legs weak from disuse. Yarrick caught her, his arm slipping around her waist to steady her. For a moment, their eyes met, and he felt a strange connection, as if she was reaching out to him in a way words couldn't express. Aboard the Eclipse. The ship's medbay was sterile and bright, a stark contrast to the dark ruins. Gar. Trent ran a series of scans, his brow furrowed in concentration. Her physiology is unlike anything I've ever seen, he said, his voice tinged with both fascination and concern. She's not entirely organic. There's something else. Something artificial. Yarrick crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on the girl. She sat on the examination table, her eyes darting around the room, taking in everything with a mixture of fear and wonder. Can she speak? Yarrick asked. I don't know, Trent replied. Her vocal cords are intact, but she hasn't said a word since you brought her in. Yarrick stepped closer, his voice gentle. Do you have a name? The girl's lips moved, forming a single word. Lyra. It was barely a whisper, but it was enough. Yarrick felt a surge of relief. She could communicate. Lyra, he repeated, nodding. We're going to help you. You're safe now. But as he spoke, a warning light flashed on the ship's console. Myra's voice came through the comms, urgent and tense. Captain, we've got company. A ship just entered orbit. It's not one of ours. Jarek's jaw tightened. Get us out of here, Mira. Now. As the eclipse lifted off, Lyra's eyes met Jarek's once more. There was something in her gaze, a flicker of recognition, of warning. The ruins had been silent for millennia, but now, they had awakened. And so had Lyra. Part 3, The Krylos Threat. The chase through the stars. The eclipse raced through the void, its engines straining as it pushed the limits of its speed. Behind them, the Krylos warship loomed like a shadow, its dark hull bristling with weapons. Despite Lyra's display of power, the Krylos had quickly recovered and were now in hot pursuit. Captain, they're gaining on us. Myra's voice was tense as she piloted the ship through a dense asteroid field. The rocks loomed large on the view screen, their jagged edges glinting in the starlight. Keep us steady, Yarrick ordered, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. We need to buy time. In the medbay, Lyra sat with Dr. Trent, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of the memories flooding her mind. Images of Etheris, towering spires, glowing streets, and a sky filled with stars, flashed before her eyes. But they were mixed with darker memories, the Krylos descending upon her city, their weapons tearing through everything in their path. I can't stop seeing it, she whispered, her voice breaking. The destruction, the screams. Trent placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression sympathetic. You've been through a lot, Lyra. But you're not alone anymore. We're here to help you. A desperate plan. On the bridge, Yarrick studied the star charts, his mind racing. They couldn't outrun the Krylos forever, and they certainly couldn't fight them head-on. They needed a plan, something bold, something unexpected. Mira, he said suddenly, set a course for the nebula of Kasari. Myra's eyes widened. The Kasari Nebula? Captain, that's a death trap. The gravitational anomalies alone could tear us apart. Exactly, Yarrick replied, a determined glint in his eye. If we can lose them in the nebula, we might have a chance. As the eclipse changed course, Yarrick made his way to the medbay. He found Lyra sitting on the edge of the examination table, her eyes distant. Lyra, he said gently, we need your help. She looked up at him, her luminous eyes filled with uncertainty. What can I do? The Krylos are after you because of your power, Yarrick explained. If we can use that power to our advantage, we might be able to escape. Lyra's brow furrowed. I don't know how to control it. Last time, it just happened. We'll figure it out together, Yarrick said, his voice firm. But we need to try. Into the nebula. The eclipse entered the Kasari Nebula, its swirling clouds of gas and dust enveloping the ship like a shroud. The view screen flickered as the ship's sensors struggled to penetrate the dense fog. Gravitational anomalies detected, Mira reported, her hands flying over the controls. "We're being pulled off course." "Hold her steady," Yarrick ordered, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Behind them, the Krylos warship followed, its massive form barely visible through the nebula's haze. Lyra stood on the bridge, her hands gripping the back of Jarek's chair. She closed her eyes, focusing on the energy within her. The hum returned, faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing moment. "I can feel it," she whispered. "The nebula, it's alive." Yarrick glanced at her, his expression a mix of hope and concern. "Can you use it?" Lyra nodded, her eyes still closed. "I think so." The power of the nebula. As the Eclipse navigated the treacherous currents of the nebula, Lyra reached out with her mind, connecting with the energy around her. The hum grew louder, filling the bridge with an otherworldly resonance. Outside, the nebula began to shift. The swirling clouds of gas and dust coalesced into a massive vortex, its center glowing with an intense light. The Krylos warship hesitated, its engines straining against the pull of the vortex. "Now!" Yarrick shouted. Lyra's eyes snapped open, and she raised her hands. The vortex surged forward, engulfing the Krylos ship in a maelstrom of energy. The warship's lights flickered and died as its systems were overwhelmed by the nebula's power. "It's working!" Mira exclaimed, her voice filled with relief. But Lyra's strength was fading. She stumbled, her body trembling as the energy drained from her. Yarrick caught her, his arms wrapping around her to keep her upright. "You did it," he said softly, his voice filled with admiration. "You saved us." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with exhaustion. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." A moment of respite. As the Eclipse emerged from the nebula, the Krylos warship was nowhere to be seen. The crew breathed a collective sigh of relief, but Yarrick knew their reprieve was temporary. "We need to find Etheris," he said, his voice firm. "It's the only way to end this." Lyra nodded, her strength slowly returning. "I remember more now. Etheris, it's hidden. Protected. But I can find it." Yarrick placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression determined. "Then we'll follow your lead." The Krylos regroup. Far behind them, the Krylos warship drifted in the void, its systems slowly coming back online. On the bridge, the Krylos commander stared at the view screen, his glowing eyes filled with rage. "The girl is more powerful than we anticipated," he said, his voice cold. "But she cannot hide forever. Prepare the fleet. We will find her, and we will take what is ours." As the Krylos ship powered up, the Eclipse continued its journey, unaware of the storm that was gathering behind them. A new hope. Aboard the Eclipse, Lyra stood in the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the stars. Yarrick joined her, his presence a comforting anchor in the chaos. "We'll find Etheris," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "And we'll uncover the truth about your past." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Yarrick. For everything." As the ship hurtled through the stars, Yarrick couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something monumental. Lyra's power, the Krylos' relentless pursuit, and the mystery of Etheris, all of it was connected. And the journey was far from over.